Where's the EQ on the reverb? Delay time? Delay. Turn up the feedback. Turn up the feedback. Turn up the feedback. Wait. Pan the condenser to the left and the dynamic to the right. Lower the threshold. Raise the output. Wait. Set the frequency range. High pass. Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Lady Audio podcast. My name is Clara, and I will be your host. The first thing I want to do today is apologize for not sending you any email updates for a while now. But if you are subscribed to Lady Audio on YouTube or iTunes or Podbean, then you have been keeping up with the episode releases. And I'll be sending out an email update soon for you. Second thing is an announcement for audio editing and song mixing by Lady Audio and Maheekats. Be on the lookout soon for brand new examples of our work. Many shares are much appreciated. Perhaps I should include this info in that email I'm supposed to send to you. Yeah. I most certainly will add this very important information in there for you. Thank you. And to support Lady Audio, please click on the little button to donate. There is a button on ladyaudio.com, and there's another one on the Lady Audio YouTube page. I'll put links right to those two places for you in the show notes. And if you would like to become a sponsor and have me give you a mention on the show, please send me an email. My email address is clara@ladyaudio.com. And thank you so much, everyone, and I will talk to you next week. All right, bye! Our guest today is Mateo of XitMuse. Mateo is a composer, and he's also a recording and mixing engineer with over a decade of professional experience. He has worked alongside several very talented music industry professionals, one of whom I'm very jealous of, and that is someone who got to engineer for Killing Joke. Mateo, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate that coming from you. Your interests weren't always about music. You started out with a strong interest in science and mathematics. What drew you into the music realm and to start writing and recording music?
I got into music late, and I wasn't exactly the most popular kid as a child. And one of the reasons was because I was so fascinated with math and science. So I was considered one of those geeky kids. Anyway, so growing up, I always figured I'd get into either engineering or physics or something like that. Just math has always come very easy to me. And when I was in my last year of high school, a few of my friends were in bands, and I was always fascinated with the guitar, and I always wanted to learn. And unfortunately, my father was not very keen to music. Like, he loved music, but he'd never wanted me to be a musician. So he was, as a child, I did ask for a guitar. My parents were like, "No, here's a soccer ball though. You can play soccer." And I'm like, "Okay." So anyways, one of my friends was in a band, and they were looking for a guitarist. And I said to them, I was like, "Hey, I don't play guitar, but I've always wanted to learn." And so he actually lent me his guitar, his spare guitar. And so he's like, "Here, you know what? We need a lead guitarist." And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Go home and practice this every day." I'm like, "Okay, sure." And I don't know, like, it was a very profound experience for me discovering music in this manner. Like, I'd listened to music in the past, but I'd never played it. So what I realized about music that I really fell in love with was the fact that everything was based on math. You know, it's all chord progressions. Everything was very pattern based. Like rhythm is just a series of patterns, right? And even like chord progressions and everything could be explained mathematically. And I found it so intellectually stimulating and very satisfying that you can make these beautiful sounds, and they all come from just waveforms that can be explained mathematically. And I was just like, this is amazing, you know, like people don't realize how much math is involved in art. And so it really had a profound effect on me because I grew up with math, and that's my first love. And so I discovered music, and I realized, you know, this is something that I'd really like to do. And I figured I could always go back to academics later on if music didn't work out. And yeah, I'm also really stubborn. So even when music wasn't working out when I first started, I was like, no, I'm not giving up. And you know, it took 10 years of just being stubborn and just trying to make it until I actually was able to start making a living out of it. But yeah, it was a long, hard road, but because I loved it so much, you know, I stuck with it. And vice versa, though, I probably would have been just as happy if I pursued physics. So, but yeah, I mean, most people probably wouldn't have found that as interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah. So
That's
yeah,
cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it's really cool. I remember seeing a meme a while back where it showed the character in the first half of it dropping out of physics, or maybe it was rocket science or something like that. And they're like, I know, I'm going to do music instead. And then it shows them with the music, and they're even more frustrated because it's even more confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, there really is a process to music. Like, I mean, some people may hear this and be like, well, that doesn't sound very creative. But realistically, taking something that you're restricted in, where like there's only so many notes in a scale, and you have to take those notes and arrange them in a way that's interesting. Because if you just play them from the first note to the last note, it doesn't sound interesting. But within those confines, you have to think very hard to make something beautiful out of that. So, you know, even though it is very math-based and structured, and it's structured beautifully, but just because it does seem like the way that I'm describing it is very cold and analytical, it requires a great deal of creative thinking to be able to make something beautiful out of that. Yeah,
you're right. And you do get a really great sound. And as a matter of fact, when I visited your YouTube channel to watch the tutorials you have there, I noticed that the sound quality of your voice sounded incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, what equipment do you use to record the audio of your tutorials?
Right. So we were just before the interview, I was telling you how warm it gets in here. I have a great deal of not a great deal, but I have a bit of analog gear in here that gets pretty hot in here, but it's well worth the heat. So I've got a fairly decent signal chain in my home studio, which is where I do a lot all the tutorial videos from. So currently, right now, I'm going from an SM57, which is just a small diaphragm dynamic mic, going into right now I'm actually just going into my Digio 3, which was modified from Black Lion Audio, which I believe you've heard of.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I just got my Apollo Twin back from them, and
No way!
Yes,
you did it!
I did it, and I cannot wait to start recording with it. But this was part of what I was talking to you about in the pre-interview.
Yes.
That sometimes things get in the way of you getting things done like
Yeah.
that. So, but yeah, we got it back, and we're looking forward to recording our next album with it.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love the stuff that Blackline Audio does. I actually recommend them to like everyone, especially people that have home studios and are on a budget. You can take a fairly inexpensive audio interface and they just do amazing things to it. So yeah, so I'm using a Digio 3 that's been modified from Blackline Audio. They replaced the clocks, the capacitors, the mic pre's. It sounds beautiful. So right now I'm just going into that, but usually what I do is I go from the SM57 into my Shadow Hill mic pre, and then I go into from the Shadow Hill mic pre into my Universal Audio 2192 converter, and then so I'm using the clock and converter from the Universal Audio 2192, and then I go SPDIF out of the converter into the Blackline interface, which I just use just to get into Pro Tools at that point. So, yeah, it's a bit of a chain, but it's a chain that I have fallen in love with and I use regularly, and I find that it sounds really great. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. So basically, okay, because some of this stuff I get a little confused with, but
Yeah, sorry. Okay.
okay,
I'm happy to explain.
okay. So, basically, you have the Digio 2 that has a word clock in it, and that has been modified by Blackline Audio. But then
The Digio 3, yeah.
Digio 3.
Yeah.
And then you also have the what was the other thing you have that also has a word clock in it?
Yes.
The Universal Audio.
Yeah, so Universal Audio used to have a master clock that they made, and it was their only clock that they made at the time, which was actually designed by the guy that started Burl Audio. He ended up leaving Universal Audio with his design because he owned the patents for it. So they don't make it anymore or sell it. So it's a mastering grade clock and converter. So it sounds incredible, which is why I usually run through there. And then so the reason why I go out of the master clock through SPDIF and then into the Digio 3 is because if you go in through SPDIF, it's already digital, which means it bypasses the converters in the Digio 3. And so it's just passing the audio straight into Pro Tools.
Oh, okay. So you get like a cleaner transition.
Yeah, so not to knock Blackline Audio at all. I just prefer the sound of the 2192 converter over the sound of the converter in the Digio 3. The Digio 3 is meant to sound like the modification is meant to sound very clean and pristine,
Right.
whereas the 2192 was designed to actually have a little more warmth to it. So it's actually a really hefty unit. It has a lot of analog components in it meant to almost simulate like tape. So it's got a beautiful tone to it when you're recording into it, and it adds like a nice warmth to your sound. So that's why I mainly use that converter over just going directly into the Digio 3.
Okay. Yeah, that was what I was wondering about. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, it is a little confusing, but
Like, which clock are you using then?
yeah. So I could use the clock from the Digio 3, but I just choose to use the 2192 for both the conversion and the clock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. And then your current interests lie in scoring for commercials and films. And I wanted to ask you, how do you approach composing? Do you get the visuals and go from there, or how does that work?
If I'm fortunate enough to get the visuals, that would be great. But in many cases, I have to go off of what the music supervisor is asking for, or the director. So for TV series or commercials, typically you don't get any visuals unless you've been hired as the composer for that series, which a lot of series do not have one composer anymore. A lot of times the music supervisors just use cues that they get from music libraries or from composers that they work with. So traditionally, you used to have a composer for a series, but that doesn't happen so often anymore. And same thing with films. Depending on the budget of the film, if it's a really big budget film, they will have a composer that will score to the visuals. But with a lot of indie films now, most directors will just end up using music from music libraries or from music producers or composers that they've worked with, like various artists and stuff like that. So it's not just one person that's doing everything anymore.
Okay. So you do a lot of collaboration work then?
Yeah, like it depends on the project. So usually for the film and TV stuff, I'll usually get a description of what they're looking for, and then I'll provide them music based on the description. And if it's a film, a lot of the times I work directly with the director. And in those cases, I will get the footage, but not in every case. So it really does depend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And now this next question will kind of dive into more of the post-production.
Right.
And I wanted to ask you in regards to dynamics, because we spoke previously about this topic.
Yes.
A lot of people will use a compressor for certain tracks, but you have experience working with expanders. And I remember learning about expanders when I was in school, but I still haven't, dove into to use expanders very much. I think I've only used it once or twice in one of our songs. But I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about how an expander works and when you would use it on a track.
Yeah, so I will use, talking about the tutorial videos, I use a compressor and an expander on my vocals when I'm doing the tutorial videos. And the reason for that is because, let me just take it back a second. So a compressor will take an audio and reduce the dynamic range of that particular signal. That's the job of a compressor. The job of an expander is the exact opposite. It increases the dynamic range of a particular signal. So it takes the quieter signals and the louder signals, and it even makes them more exaggerated. So it'll bring the quieter signals even lower and the louder signals more prominent.
Okay.
What will it take for you to give me a moment? Will you hear what I want to say to you? I want you to listen first without passing judgment. Whether I deserve it, that is up to you. Do you have it in your heart to look past from where we are and give me a second start? You don't know me anything, but I'm begging you for this one chance. You have the power to open the door. A second from you can change my world. What will it take? Please tell me, what will it take? You may be thinking, why should you help me out? I'm breaking all the rules. Can you think back to the time when you were in my shoes? Giving somebody something for nothing takes a big heart. Is it in you? Am I worthy of having one last shot? Do you have it in your heart to look past from where we are take? I understand if you don't wanna take the wall down. Let me prove to you I will never let you down. I will never let you down. Do you have it in your heart to look past from where we are and give me a second start? You don't owe me anything, but I'm begging you for this one chance. You have the power to open the door. A second for you can't change my world. What will it take? Please tell me, what will it take?
Yeah, so that's what an expander does. So it's basically the reverse of a compressor.
Okay.
And now I use an expander with my YouTube videos because I don't know, my gear's not noisy, but just in case I don't want to have any any noticeable noise in between words. So what I'll do is I have a particular plugin that I really like to use on my voice for the YouTube videos, which is the SSL Duende plugin, the channel strip. And that has a built-in compressor and expander in it. And so what I'll do is I'll compress my vocals and I'll have the expander engaged and it'll level out my vocals, but I'll leave the threshold high enough so that it's not also compressing the ambient noise in the room. And so what that does, it allows the expander to catch the ambient noise and bring that ambient noise down even lower so it becomes less audible.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's really useful for cleaning up dialogue, or it's really useful for taking something that's been maybe overcompressed and making it less compressed.
Okay.
Like people use it on drum tracks sometimes if they only have, like, say, a stereo file of a drum loop. They can throw it through an expander and try to create a little more dynamics if it's been compressed too hard. Okay. Yeah, so things like that. It's in the context that I use it in for the YouTube videos, it's almost acting like a gate because I do end up bringing down the audio all the way down, like the ambient noise. But you can choose it, you can set it so that it brings it down a certain number of decibels. So you don't have to completely eliminate it.
Okay. And what's the name of that plugin again?
So the channel strip plugin that I use is the SSL Duende channel strip. So it's the actual plugin made from SSL. So there's a lot of SSL type channel strips out there. Waves makes one. I don't know. There's a lot of duplicate replicas out there. I don't think Universal Audio one makes one. I don't think so. But yeah. So this one's actually made by SSL, and it sounds amazing. I love it. I use it on everything.
That's cool. Yeah, I'll put a link to that in the show notes because I think some other people will really like that, and besides myself, of course.
Yeah. Actually, SSL is actually doing a giveaway every week for one of their plugins. So that might be something that you might want to throw out there too. So yeah, okay. So maybe, yeah. And every week you can get into the raffle again. So yeah, maybe you can score the channel strip.
Cool. I am going to check that out. I just wrote it down.
Nice.
And so I wanted to ask you too, because I forgot to ask you this the last time. What is the story about the person who engineered for Killing Joke? How did you meet this person? What's their name and all that?
Oh, okay. So I don't know his story necessarily. He was my teacher in school. So he was one of my professors for engineering. And he's actually more known for hip hop type stuff.
Okay.
That's more of what he does, but his name is Alf. So he used to tell us some interesting stories that I don't think I'm allowed to repeat. But but yeah, he said they were a crazy fun time.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. They say that Killing Joke is more of a tribe than a band.
Oh yeah. And yeah, their productions are really high quality too. Like they put a lot of work into their production and it sounds beautiful.
Yeah. On to my next question.
Mm-hmm.
What are your 3 favorite tools to use when you are mixing?
Oh my God, this question. This is like the hardest question ever.
It is.
Can you ask me how to solve world peace? That seems easier.
Oh no.
I mean,
you must answer this question.
Okay. Okay. So, was it specific plugins or types of plugins?
It is just your 3 favorite tools. So
Right,
it doesn't
okay.
necessarily have to be a plugin.
Oh, okay.
But it has to do with mixing. So what are your 3 favorite tools to use when you're mixing? Because tools can be different if you're recording, you have different tools than when you're mixing. So.
Well, okay. Give me a moment to think about this.
Okay.
You can edit out the pause, right?
Okay, I'll edit out the pause.
Okay. 3 best tools or 3 most important tools for mixing is 1, your DAW, very basic. Being comfortable with a particular DAW is really important. So a lot of people will just choose any DAW and just be like, oh, this should be like, some people hear that Pro Tools is really great for mixing. So this might be someone that has been working in, say, Ableton Live, and then they decide that they want to mix their stuff. So they download Pro Tools and try mixing on it. But that is really going to be more work for them than anything else. It's really important to be comfortable with your DAW, regardless of what it is. Sure, some DAWs are have better features that other DAWs don't have. Like I use Pro Tools and I love it for mixing, but I prefer Logic for composing.
Okay.
So things like that. So your DAW is a big one. So I use Pro Tools, so that'll be my DAW for mixing. The other thing is your converters. Converters are so important. If you don't have good converters, you're not going to have a good representation of the audio. So bad converters are going to reproduce the audio in a less transparent way. So having a good, transparent, accurate sounding converter is very important. And so that's really important for not just mixing, but also recording. The last thing is your monitors. Having good monitors that you're familiar with and that are not biased to any particular range of frequencies. So you want as flat of response monitors as possible. But if you don't have super flat response monitors, just understanding them very well is important, and having monitors that have low distortion, reproduce low distortion, because there's a lot of monitors out there that tend to have a bit of distortion in them, which actually fatigue your ears after a while. So those are like the 3 tools that are important. Is that kind of along the lines that you're looking for?
Those are the 3 your choice for the 3 most important tools. But are those necessarily your favorite tools? It sounds like they probably would be, since they're like the most important.
Yeah, I need that. Well, I mean, having a favorite and having something that's necessary is not necessarily the same thing.
Right.
Like, I mean, there's plugins that I absolutely love, but they're not necessary. They're just, I love them because they're freaking cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, those are things that are necessary. But I mean, it's hard to limit it to just 3 things.
It's true. It's true.
So hard. There's so many other factors with mixing. If mixing was as easy as breaking it down to 3 things, everyone could do it, right?
Yeah, maybe I should change the way I ask this question to people.
Maybe like out of like the main categories of plugins, what's each like one favorite out of each category? So like
Yeah.
EQ, compression, reverb, that would be
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely spot on about monitors. I've
Yeah,
spoken with
yeah.
a few different people who record and mix or master their own music, and monitors seems to be one of the number one things that consistently comes up in people's top three is having a good set of monitors. Some people will just use some headphones, and you can totally tell the difference in some of their mixes. Like they'll say, well, this one I mixed with headphones, and this one I mixed with just regular stereo speakers, and this one I mixed with monitors. And it could be all three from the same person, and you can totally tell the differences in those mixes. And the ease of listening is every single time it comes from, like, the best mixes I hear, even with a blind test, come from mixing with monitors.
Right.
And a good example of that was someone I interviewed recently who their previous mixes were pretty good, but then they got new monitors. Like they had monitors before, but then they got new monitors.
Right.
And it just expanded their sound. And they still had the same recording equipment, but they were using something different for reference monitors. And it's like when you're painting, how I look at it is like if you're in a room and with poor lighting and you're trying to paint, your colors are going to come out differently than if you're painting in a room that has really good lighting and you can actually see the colors.
Right.
So when you have those good reference monitors and they have that flattest response that you can get for the money, then you're going to be able to hear all those different colors. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why I mentioned the converters is because the converters are kind of a bottleneck. So you could have the best monitors in the entire world. You could have the best monitors money can buy, but if you're using an interface with subpar converters, it will make a huge difference in how you hear the music coming out of the monitors. Like, for example, when I traded up from my Mbox 3 Pro to the Digio 3 that was modified by Black Lion, I was using the same monitors, but the change between the interfaces was so dramatic that I would go back and listen to mixes and hear things that I didn't hear before.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's like when I upgraded the interface, I was listening to the audio where I could hear there was better imaging. Like I could hear things in more detail across the stereo image. The low end, I was able to perceive the low end much more accurately. There was just a lot of detail that came out that was somewhat smeared with the previous interface, and that's why converters are so important. And not just converters, but also like the quality of the components in your hardware that you're using going into feeding the monitors. So, yeah, like monitors are incredibly important, but it all starts from the source, which is the converters.
Okay. And then a question just popped into my mind, and I'm sorry I am popping this at you now.
No,
but
it's cool.
But I wanted to ask you, because a friend of mine was experiencing pops and clicks when they're recording into Logic.
Right.
And I wondered if you knew about that, because I've experienced that in the past, and I've overcome it because I looked it up and I figured out how to work it with my computer.
Right.
But then again, I have quad core on my Mac, and I think that this person, my friend, only has dual core, and I was
Right.
wondering if that might have something to do with getting pops and clicks.
Yeah, there's two reasons that I can think of off the top of my head right now about the pops and clicks. One is what you're talking about, which is the processing. So what happens is if your processing speed is not fast enough to process all the audio that's going in, so actually three reasons. So one could be the processor. So in Pro Tools, there's an option to adjust the buffer speed. So if the buffer speed is too low, it just stops the recording. It stops the audio because it can't keep up with all the processing going on. But there's an option to ignore the fact that it's not performing optimally. And what'll happen is if you turn that on, you'll actually start to get clicks and pops because it can't accurately, like it can't smoothly process all the audio at once that fast. So it could be an overusage of plugins, or it could also be the amount of tracks that they have going on at once. If the drive is not fast enough, the drive can underrun, and that can also cause clicking, or it can cause the playback to stop. And the third thing is clocking issues. So if your friend has anything running in the background that, like, say, I know this has happened in the past with some people where they have, say, Pro Tools or Logic running, but they also have YouTube in the background. The audio from YouTube could be set at a different clock speed than your session, and the difference in the clock speeds can cause your clock to go a little weird, and you'll get clicks and pops. So that actually happens with me with SoundCloud for some reason. If I have Pro Tools open and SoundCloud, the audio from SoundCloud will actually pop. It'll just give me clicks and pops. Wow. So there's a few different reasons. So it can be caused by clocking issues, processing issues, or if the audio isn't being pulled off the drive fast enough.
Okay. So I'll give her that information, and I will also look into in more depth about buffer speed, because I remember from school, I think the buffer speed for recording was lower than for mixing.
That is correct, because you want the least amount of latency possible. So say you're singing and you're recording your voice and you're hearing the music that you're going to sing to. You don't want there to be a delay of the music getting to your ears and you singing, because if it's delayed, then your audio is going to be delayed. So the buffer size needs to be as low as possible for recording. And then when it comes to mixing or production or anything not recording, you will want to have the buffer size as high as possible, because at that point you're not worried about latency. And what the buffer size does is there's like different increments of buffer size. So you've got like 64 samples, 128 samples, or sorry, is it milliseconds or samples?
I can't remember.
But
I know it gets pretty high. It's like 1,000 and something.
Yeah, there's like 256, there's 512, and 1024.
Okay.
And so what that means is that I believe it's in samples. So if you have it set to 1024 samples for the buffer size, that means from the point you hit play on your space bar, there's 1,024 samples of pause before the audio actually plays after you hit the space bar. And the reason for that is because it's giving your software a buffer time to process all the information to play back smoothly.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. So that's where it comes in handy when you have a lot of plugins on things.
That's right.
Yeah, it needs all that time to process.
Exactly.
Yeah. One other thing that I remember was, because of that issue of your system needing to catch up with what you're doing. Sometimes if you record a vocal and let's say I'm recording a song, I'm laying down the last track, which is the vocal, and I'm pretty happy with it, and I'll go ahead and I'll put on a compressor, reverb, and stuff like that, and EQ it and everything. And then once I'm kind of happy with that, then what I can do is just bounce that track in place and then use that. And what that does is it helps to free up that processing that the computer needs to do, because basically you're bouncing it down into another track and it's already processed.
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, a lot of the DAWs out there actually have like the freeze option available, so that it does exactly what you said. So Pro Tools didn't have the option to freeze tracks until version 12. But other applications like Logic have had it for like years, and I'm pretty sure Cubase and Ableton have it too.
That's a really helpful tool that I'm starting to trust more, because I don't know, I guess I'm just old school sometimes, where I'm like, well, but what if I want to change something? Well, the thing is that other track, you can select for that other track to just stay there with those settings and then just bounce down into a new track. So you're not losing anything. It's just that if you want to change anything, you have to unmute your original track and make the change or whatever. But anyway.
And I mean, the beauty of digital audio workstations is that nothing is destructible. I mean, you can delete stuff, but I mean, it's all meant to be non-destructive, you know? So you never lose anything. I
remember back in Logic 7, though, it was losable. Well, but now it's lossless.
No. And actually, no, it's still an option. It's an option in Pro Tools as well. So you can actually set it so that it's all destructible. So all the DAWs actually default to non-destructible. But you can actually set them to be to overwrite audio. So
all right, so watch out, people. Don't click that button.
Yeah. Or you might be crying all night. And
it was the best song ever.
I know. That was the take, I swear.
Cool. So Mateo, where can people go to find out more about your composing and mixing services?
Yeah, so anyone looking for original compositions or music production, recording, mixing, all that stuff, you can find me at my website, which is XitMuse, and it's basically like Exit Muse, but without the E at the front. So it's just XitMuse.com. And all my social networks are the same. It's XitMuse, so XitMuse on Twitter and Instagram, and on YouTube as well. And so if people like to follow and find educational tips or want to ask me any advice on production or engineering, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I do a lot of that, so I frequently respond to people that have questions about mixing and engineering. So I'm happy to help out.
That's cool. And I'll put the link to your website first, and then I'll also put the link to your YouTube channel. I just wanted to let people know that your YouTube channel and links to all those other places are all available on exitmuse.com. So if you just go there, that's the hub, and you can find the YouTube and the Twitter, and all the things are there.
All the things that those kids are using today. The Twitter.
Yeah. The Twitter.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining me today, Mateo. It's always a real pleasure to talk with you, because I learned so much, and you're so nice and easy to talk to. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your kind words. It's very it's a pleasure and honor to be on your show. So thank you for having me. I'd be happy to come back anytime you need me. So
that would be great. Yeah, I would definitely want to have you on the show again in the future.
Awesome.